10:15. What time is Dhuhr?
1:15.
1:15. So we have 3 hours. Okay. Bismillah, alhamdulillah, salatu wassalamu ala rasulillah, wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. We begin in the name of Allah. All praise and glory be to Allah, and may His finest peace and blessings be upon His Messenger Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, and his family and his companions, all those who tread his path. Jazakallah khair, everyone, for giving up. You're not sacrificing. It's a trade. It's a handoff. And what you're getting is far better than what you're giving. But you being here on a Saturday and a Sunday is really very admirable and commendable. I just wanted to recognize that. May Allah reward you immensely for every step you took here and everything you put off to be here. Jazakallahu kulla khair. May He reward you in ways that only He can. Make your faith firm and take it from strength to strength. Allahumma ameen. So today, after we spoke about faith and the importance of, investing in our faith and cultivating our faith, and we ended yesterday with a slide about constantly asking Allah to renew that faith, because no matter how much you build, there's no static. It's either going up or it's going down, right? And so after doing that, I wanted to speak today a little bit about the levels of faith, what those look like, because of the ways that Allah taught us how to protect our faith is by teaching us how to measure, as we alluded to yesterday. So we'll speak about the different degrees of faith and what happens when you fall too low, too critical, what that looks like, how to identify that, what happens when you fall below the threshold altogether, when you lose faith, faithlessness, or kufr, the opposite of iman, right? We'll talk a little bit about all of that, inshallah, today. So the first thing is the degrees of faith. So I'll start from the bottom up, right? The word iman, and this could get a little bit confusing. The word iman, faith, talks about many different things. You'll find it showing up in many different places in the Quran and Sunnah, and it's speaking about different types of believers, different levels of believers, right? And so believers in the most general sense, the widest net of mu'mineen, of iman, are people that have baseline faith. Guys know baseline, like baseline, right? But baseline here, we mean minimal iman. They have the bare minimum where they still qualify as being Muslim, right? Islam means submission. So you basically submitted to the bare minimum. You've accepted the bare minimum, so you're Muslim. You're Muslim. That means if you die here, you don't want to be here, because if you're just here, you could fall out at any minute also. Like, it's a dangerous place to be. And then you meet Allah beneath this. Don't walk that line. Don't gamble with your soul. But just to understand, that is baseline faith. It alludes to all of the people of Islam, the Muslim, right? People of Islam. And a simple way to explain what qualifies for this is that when your faith, the faith in your heart, drives you to accept Islam as true, and Islam is binding, right? So you're not just saying like, yeah, the Quran's from God, but I'm not going to accept it, right? Like I said to you yesterday, the Jews of Medina, for example, said, you are a prophet, but not for the Israelites, just for the Arabs. We don't have to listen to you, right? No. To accept that Islam is true and that it's binding, I'm obligated to accept it. I'm committed to it. In principle, that's like the bare minimum of Islam. And we'll prove this and come back to it later. Just want you to get a conceptualization of the stratas, right? The layers. The second level is Iman al-Wajib, which is a mandatory faith. And a lot of times, the word Iman here is used, and it's confusing, because if all three of these are levels of Iman, then you throw Iman as just one of them. So it's a little bit confusing, but there's a great wisdom. Why? Because Allah Azza wa Jal wants all believers to be there, expects all believers to get there. You see, this amount of iman is when you have so much faith that you're fulfilling your obligations. You're no longer punishable. And Allah does not want to punish you. That's the idea, right? And so falling beneath this, you're not Muslim. Okay? Falling beneath this, you're not Muslim. Falling beneath that means you're not fulfilling the obligations or some of the obligations. It means you're punishable. You're still Muslim. You'll still get to Jannah eventually if you die like this, but you could be punished for how long? That's the idea. So mandatory iman is for you to grow your faith to the point where you're fulfilling your obligations to Allah. You're loving him the right way, you're fearing him the right way, you're trusting him the right way, you're praying to him in the right way, you're dressing the right way, you're living the right way, you're earning the right way, you're spending the amount of faith that gets you to fulfill your obligations is the obligatory level, the mandatory level of faith. Is that clear? Pretty good? You're good? Alhamdulillah. This third level is complete faith. And that's just a placeholder. There's no such thing as complete faith. Meaning there's no ceiling to complete faith. No one completes their faith. We're never going to become prophets, right? We're not going to become prophets. And this is also known as the level of ihsan. You guys know the level of Islam, iman, ihsan. This is also referred to in the Quran and in the hadith as ihsan. Ihsan is when your faith is so strong, so healthy, that it drives you beyond the obligations, beyond what's mandatory. So how do you know that you're not just doing what's not mandatory, like the recommended stuff? Don't get this wrong, because a lot of Muslims would get this wrong. Shaitan plays this trick on them, where they don't do the obligations and they pick stuff that they don't even have to do, right? So I sell alcohol, but I go to Umrah every year. Well, no, you need to stop selling alcohol, even if you don't go to Umrah every year. That's the idea, right? The person of ihsan has covered the levels below them and then some. Is that clear? You got to be careful. You got to be careful. So that is the level of ihsan. Any questions on this? Is this pretty straightforward? I wanted you to see it from a high level, and then I'm going to prove it to you, because my word means nothing. Allah defines faith. Allah defines what's acceptable and unacceptable. Allah defines kufr, faithlessness. He defines what's not good enough, right? That's the idea. So I just want you to understand what the scholars have understood, and now I'll show you where they get it from. So the first one we'll start out is baseline faith. This is a good ayah that sort of summarizes for us how to think about baseline faith. Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَتَمَّتْ كَلِمَةُ رَبِّكَ صِدْقًا وَعَدْلًا لَا مُبَدِّلَ لِكَلِمَاتِهِ وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. The word of your Lord is perfect, has been perfected, meaning in the Quran in particular, right? The most perfect revelation. In truth and in justice, and none can change his words. وَهُوَ السَّمِيعُ الْعَلِيمُ. He's the all-hearing, all-knowing. Just think of truth and justice. To accept everything Islam said is true, it's necessary to have baseline faith, right? And to believe that everything Islam teaches is just and fair, is baseline faith. Okay? Obviously, if you reject one of the facts Islam said, Islam clearly said, right? Then you can't be Muslim. You don't believe in Allah's words, right? You don't believe they're true. And if you reject one of the teachings that Islam clearly said, then you can't be Muslim, right? This doesn't mean you can't become weak. There's a difference between weakness and rejection, and we'll come back to that. But just as a placeholder for right now, just one example, keep using the word placeholder. Think of the difference between Adam alayhi salam, who believed in Allah, and Shaitan, who left Islam. What's the difference? They both made a mistake, right? One of them rebelled, said, I don't have to listen to you and prostrate. The other one said, Rabbana zalamna anfusana. Oh, our Lord, we wronged ourselves. We messed up. We had no right to disobey you. So he has accepted Allah as his king, accepted Allah as the commander, accepted that he is the servant, he is the slave, and Allah is the master. Shaitan did not accept that. No, that's not true. He doesn't deserve to be prostrated to. No, I'm not going to listen. That's what would remove him from Islam. That's the difference between weakness and rebellion. To have baseline faith, you have to submit, not rebel. Anything Allah said and anything Allah taught or legislated, commanded. It's clear? Sidqan wa adla. Just remember, sidqan wa adla, sidqan wa adla. Then let's move up to level 2. Level 2 is mandatory faith. It means just because you've entered the door of faith doesn't mean you have as much faith as you should, right? To not be punishable. Some of the Bedouins said, the Bedouins are people that live outside of Medina in the time of the Prophet ﷺ. They don't come much, and they're known to be, because of their environment and everything else, not as educated, not as gentle, not that, right? It's just their environment, like our environment, makes us tend to be a little bit more critical of religion. I said that yesterday. Where does it come from? From the ether, right? The dominant culture. Likewise, the Bedouins, their culture made them a little bit callous, right? And that rubbed off on their faith. And so the Quran is reminding them, be careful, that your culture could be an inherent challenge to your faith. So this is happening here as well, right? This applies so much to us. The Quran is not about 7th century Arabia, right? It's for the world. It fits perfectly. This is talking about so many of us. When we are away from the centers of education, we're like the Bedouins, right? When we're in a society that is resistant and reluctant about religion, we're like the Bedouins. They're like that. And we are susceptible to being like that as well. So some of the Bedouins would say, Amanna, we've believed. Say to them, O Muhammad, you have not believed. But instead say, Aslamna, we've submitted. You guys, you walk through the door, you guys have the baseline, you're Muslim. You're Muslim. But don't say Amanna with this false sense of security, this premature sense of like, I'm good, right? Say we have submitted, and faith, meaning enough faith, has not yet entered your hearts. Why am I saying enough faith? Why am I qualifying and saying enough faith? Because the verse just says faith. Why am I saying enough faith? Because they says you're allowed to say we're Muslims, and a Muslim obviously believes something, right? So you're Muslim and you got some faith, but faith, the full amount, that's the full minimum, if you will, or the minimum of full, is not there yet. Has not yet entered your hearts. But if you obey Allah and His Messenger, right? The obligations. You obey Allah and His Messenger wholeheartedly, He will not discount you of anything from your reward. Meaning, you want the real amount of faith, the mandatory amount, do what's mandatory on it. Obey Allah, obey His Messenger, sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Don't be selective. Don't be like, I'm going to do this stuff, but not that stuff. Or I'm going to listen to this ayah, but not that ayah. Right? Or this hadith and not that hadith. No, obey Allah and His Messenger. Right? Wholeheartedly. ولكن ادخلوا في السلم كافة, the other verse says. We'll come back to it, inshallah. Okay. So we said Islam, submission, Iman, the real amount of faith you should be looking for, should be working on. Then there's Ihsan. Ihsan, so it's like Muslim, Mu'min, Muhsin, right? The Muhsin is the person that has Ihsan. Ihsan is like, he worships Allah as though he sees Him. He doesn't just even stop at the obligations. Where's my ayah? So there's actually a bunch of, where's my ayah? Okay. So Allah Azza wa Jal promised Jannah to a group of people in Surah Ali Imran. In the ayah before this one. Then in this ayah, He continues to describe these people that will go to paradise. Flying colors. The most successful believers. He says they are those who donate in prosperity and adversity, meaning in good times and bad times. And those who control their anger and pardon others. And Allah loves the muhsineen. Ignore good doers for a second. Muhsineen, the people of ihsan. Why is it called this class of people of ihsan? Because these actions are beyond obligatory, right? It's the third level. Is it obligatory on you to donate in good times and in hard times? No, it's not. When it's hard times, you receive donations. You're qualified to receive zakah. You don't have to pay sadaqah, right? But these people don't look at that. I have to or I don't. I'm still going to try my best to donate every time there's an opportunity to donate. And those who control their anger and pardon others. What does that mean? Are we obligated to control our anger in Islam? Yes. So fix it. Why am I saying these qualities are extra? I hate the word extra. But you know what I mean, right? Beyond just the mandatory. Why is this say that? Come on, try. How much anger do I have to control? Am I not allowed to feel angry? No, you're allowed to feel angry. Right? Not hurting others, but what if they hurt me? Huh?
Still not hurt.
Still don't hurt them, so I'm obligated to forgive them.
No, I'm saying it's above, I mean, even if someone hurts you, you still show them kindness.
See?
That's above.
Jazakallah khairan. Because to control your anger, maybe this comma is a bit deceptive. To control your anger in a way that caused you to pardon others is not mandatory, right? Like if somebody cuts my arm off deliberately, eye for an eye, arm for an arm, I'm allowed to seek retribution. Go to the government, say, I believe in Islamic law. But like under Islamic governance, right? You're allowed to ask for equal retribution. You're allowed to. You can't say astaghfirullah, you must, forgive them. No, you don't have to forgive them. Justice, that's mandatory. But this is speaking about not being just with them. But going above that and saying, no, I'm gonna let that go. I'll get mine on the day of judgment. It's gonna be more gratifying, the reward, than just to see this guy lose his arm as well, right? And so notice now, Allah is saying He loves the muhsineen, the people of ihsan, and He describes them with actions that are above the obligatory. Everybody caught it? I'm just trying to drill it home. Oh, this one is a little bit longer, and I might skip it. No, let's do it, inshallah. Another glimpse of ihsan, or the usage of the word ihsan in the Quran. When Allah Tabaraka wa Ta'ala is inviting people to paradise and describing it, He says the muttaqeen, the righteous and the pious, they are going to be in gardens and surrounded by springs, and they are going to be joyfully receiving what their Lord grants them, because before the hereafter, they were truly people of ihsan. كانوا قبل ذلك محسنين. Okay? We didn't get to the qualities yet. Okay? This is about the reward. This is the reward for the muhsineen. Now Allah is going to now describe to you, you want to be one of these people? You want to belong to this class that have the best reward? They have the best actions, and here they are. These next verses are the continuation. Okay? They used to sleep only little in the night. Is that mandatory? Not mandatory. You could sleep 8 hours, still catch Fajr on time and Isha on time. Right? And they pray for forgiveness before dawn. It's just, there's some scholars said they're seeking forgiveness for the little bit that they slept, which is not even a sin. They're going above and beyond, right? Saying, oh Allah, I wish I could have done more. I wish I could have done better. I wish I hadn't daydreamed as much or night dreamed as much or whatever, right? Even more, not an obligation. And then it says, this one's a little bit, requires some context or background. And in their wealth, وَفِي أَمْوَالِهِمْ, in their wealth, is a share for the beggar and the poor. There's another verse in the Quran that sounds just like this, but with one additional ayah. In Surah Al-Ma'arij. This is in Surah Safat. Dhariyat. Jazakallah khair. Dhariyat. Good catch. In the other, in Al-Ma'arij, Allah says, these righteous people, في أموالهم حق معلوم. In their wealth is a known right, which is 2.5%. It's known in Islam what the right of the poor in your wealth is, 2.5%. In this one, because they're muhsineen, it's not 2.5%. It's not known. It's undetermined, right? In their wealth is a share, not a known share. No one knows because they're not calculating. I have, I give. It's not like, okay, that's how much they deserve. No, it's a share. They always know that the poor have a right to their money. It's like open-ended. It's perpetual. Every chance they can. So notice all of these descriptions feeding back to our understanding of it being a level of ihsan. May Allah make us people of ihsan. Say ameen. That's what you want to be at. No skipping steps. Okay? If you don't solidify this, you're not going to be able to get there. And if you don't work on these, you won't be able to get there. All right? I told you, I know I already said it. People do it all the time. I call it religious sedatives. Okay? You may not even have the baseline in certain respects. You're skeptical of the Quran or the Prophet ﷺ, but you just go through the motions of making your prayers or paying your zakah or fasting Ramadan or all. It's very dangerous, extremely dangerous, right? Or a person could not be fulfilling their obligations and they're just telling themselves, but I do this, I do that. It's to silence your own conscience. This is not really for Allah Azza wa Jalla. It's not driven by faith. It's driven by the human urge to not want to look in the mirror and say, I'm a monster. We all do that. Muslims and non-Muslims do this. It's the feel good of doing good, right? But a person of faith operates different. They build out their faith and they're driven by it in the right way and in the right order. You know, a good example of this also is, I said, like, you sell haram and then you go to Umrah. Even in Umrah, right? People in Umrah, how many people have done Hajj or Umrah before? May Allah write it for all of you, and write it many times for us. Like they get real hostile sometimes around the black stone, right? And this is bananas. It's crazy because touching the black stone is beyond the man. It's just it's a recommended act. It's a virtuous act. That's it. But the sanctity of your fellow Muslim is extremely high. So how do you hurt a Muslim? You drop mandatories for the sake of just getting to the black stone. Crazy things. Crazy things happen. Allah understand. So may Allah guide us and grant us goodness, Ya Rabb. Yeah. So that's ihsan, iman, all of that. Now let's get to kufr. We'll go to 11 and take a break, inshallah. Kufr. Faithlessness. This is the opposite of iman. Now we're going down, if you will. We're not building up. This is just so we can avoid it, right? We're not going down. We're studying downwards, inshallah azza wa jal. What is kufr? Kufr is like disbelief, unbelief, non-belief, faithlessness, all fine translations. But let's start with a lighthearted moment. I want to survey you guys. All farmers are kuffar. Who agrees? Raise your hand. Can't believe you guys let these brothers into your masjid. And it's like one sister, I quote her at the board of my eye. Yes, sir. False? Why is it false? Farmers supposed to leave. So all farmers in America are kuffar? Nope. It doesn't work either. So who doesn't agree with this? So you're both right and you're both wrong. It depends on what you mean by kuffar. This is a joke, obviously. The reason why it's useful. Kafara actually sounds the same in English and Arabic. I don't know if there's an etymological reason. I mean, there are English words that have Arabic roots. I just don't know if this is one of them. The word kafara means cover. To cover, literally to cover. I don't know if it's a coincidence or it's true. So a farmer is known as a kafir in Arabic, even in the Quran. Allah speaks about the farmer when he's impressed with his crop and he calls them kuffar. Kuffar here doesn't mean that all farmers are going to hell. Okay? A lot of really righteous Muslim farmers out there, believing farmers out there. It's not what's meant. But a farmer linguistically is called a kafir because that's what he does. He covers the seed and he protects it and he tends to it and makes sure that it's able to let its roots out, germinate, so it can grow healthy and all of that. So they're called kuffar. That's what they're called. The disbeliever is called a kafir because he covers the truth. He buries the way the farmer buries the seed, right? He buries the truth. That's in general why the kafir is called the kafir across farmers and non-believers or people without faith. Is that clear, everybody? This is not just for fun. It's going to be operative, inshallah, later. Yes. Yes, by context. And so what you need to know Islamically, is that is the reason or the origin why kafir is used that way. Because a kafir in general is a rejecter of faith, right? Or a refuser of faith, but that's not necessarily the only definition. Remember I told you Allah defines faith and Allah defines faithlessness? That's not necessarily the only definition. So what if someone, we don't know that he has actively, consciously rejected faith, We're going to say everyone's a believer until we clearly conclude that this person has rejected the faith. That could be a different discussion. All right? But yes, sir.
Kindly repeat the question to the viewers.
The question is here.
Yeah,
If there are questions, got it.
I will do the-
Okay, I will do, inshallah. Jazakallah khair. I appreciate that. Thank you for the heads up. But for now, just know that kufr, disbelief, is the opposite of iman. The same way you need iman to survive on the day of judgment, you need to avoid kufr to survive on the day of judgment. They're diametrically opposite. Yes, sir.
We're just gonna comment really based on something we were saying before, which seems to this concept of covering over.
Yes,
We're
sir.
talking about a person who makes Umrah every year, but then is selling alcohol, right? And the concept of the internal dialogue they have with themselves in order to justify certain behaviors.
Yes, sir.
And I would say the way that I was taught is that that is the covering up of our internal truth. And that is a way to understand that concept of where that kufr concept comes from, is you're trying to actually cover up the things that you know to be false in yourself.
And that is why some scholars considered sins synonymous with minor kufr, like the lesser form of kufr. To repeat the question or the comment for those online, the brother was saying it reminded him of something he was taught, that people, when they sort of have selective righteousness, they're trying to cover up what the truth they know by just picking alternative, arbitrary choices of, I'll just do these, right? So that I don't have to focus on those, or I don't have to live up to those. So in a sense, yes. All right. Now, kufr has levels. Was there another question? Kufr, faithlessness, has levels. There's minor kufr and there's major kufr. Minor kufr, this is the definition I just referred my brother to, but it is a little bit controversial. For the sake of simplicity, I'm giving you this one definition, okay? When you fall beneath mandatory faith, remember we said faith has baseline, mandatory. So when you're like, you fell under the mandatory level, that means you've committed kufr, but not the type that will remove you from Islam. Meaning you're still resembling in your actions people whose faith is not there or not where it should be. That's the idea. That's why some scholars also call it al-kufr al-amali. It's usually in your practice, usually in your sins. This is one definition. Some scholars say no, sins are like this, and only the worst of them are minor kufr. Other scholars say sins are minor kufr. Anyway, no big deal. A lot of this is semantics. There's not much sort of practical benefit in getting to the bottom of this scholarly discussion. So that's minor kufr. Major kufr is when you fell beneath the baseline. Remember there's baseline, remember there's mandatory. If you don't have mandatory, you're punishable. If you don't have baseline, no salvation. You're not a believer. You don't ever stop getting punished according to the majority. Like you're outside of the fold altogether. And that usually happens in terms of your beliefs. Okay, so let's give some examples of minor kufr. If this is the right definition. I just want to be honest, right? So it is mandatory on you to trust God, right or wrong? That's one of our obligations in Islam, trust God. So if you now accept to put your trust in something else, right? This could be a form of minor kufr inside you. This could reflect a form of minor kufr inside you. What does that mean? An easy example is superstitions. Things that there's actually no empirical, see, I don't hate science, empirical evidence for it helping, right? So like amulets, like charms. The Prophet ﷺ called those a form of kufr or shirk, right? من علق تمامة فلا أتم الله له من علق تمامة فقد أشرك. Whoever hangs a charm, a lucky charm. The majority of the Sahaba would even consider pages of Quran, hanging them for protection, to be charms, by the way. The majority of them. A little bit of controversy on it, but it's a minority opinion within the Sahaba. So the idea is to hang an object. Of course, the Quran protects us, reciting it, believing in it, living by it, but to hang something for protection, that sort of reliance on that thing was called by the Prophet ﷺ a form of minor kufr or minor shirk, right? If Allah told you a certain something is blessed, right? Like reciting the Quran, then you're trusting Allah who told you. If Allah told you that drinking Zamzam is blessed, you're trusting Allah who told you. There's nothing there, right? But that's one example. Mandatory to trust Allah, have tawakkul. So the opposite of that would be to have tawakkul where it doesn't belong, like amulets and stuff, superstitions. I told you that's the most obvious example because there's no evidence for amulets actually working. It's just wishful thinking, right? I'll give you a less obvious example, and I hope I don't confuse you. There's a brother that I heard about that the doctors basically told him, you need to take this medicine religiously, meaning like very strict on the schedule. Your life depends on it. You got to take this medication. And so he was noticed by some of his relatives or friends that he would always take the pill out. And before he would ingest the pill, he would throw it on the floor. And then he'd pick it up. Hopefully he dusts it off. And he would take it and tell him, what are you doing? He's saying, I just want to remind my heart that this medicine can't even help itself, let alone help me. It's a very beautiful notion. I mean, I won't say you have to do it this way. But the idea is he's protective of the tawakkul, the heart not relying on even the medicine. He's telling himself that even if this medicine works, it's because Allah made it effective, right? Because he's afraid, because the Prophet ﷺ said that the subtle forms of shirk, the subtle forms of kufr, I fear for you the most. It can creep up on you. That's the idea. Actually, an unfortunate example of this, not with medicine, but with drugs, narcotics. People feel that their life is dependent on it. Cannabis saved my life, the hashtag says, right? That whole idea that I need this to live, you may not realize this could be damaging your soul more than it's damaging your body. This drug that you're taking, right? Anyway, sister had a question. Example. I'll give you another example of minor kufr. We're obligated to exhibit patience when a calamity strikes, right? It's mandatory for you to exhibit patience, to not show objection. Therefore, the Prophet ﷺ, that is why the Prophet ﷺ said that one of the acts of kufr that will never fully leave my ummah is wailing over the dead. Right? That's the idea, because you're obligated to show patience. And so wailing over the dead was called kufr because it doesn't match with a person who has enough faith to uphold those obligations. You're allowed to cry. You're allowed to miss the person. All of this. You're allowed to grieve for days. You're allowed to. But to wail and to express frustration at God, that is a form of kufr in the hadith. Can we think of one more? You are obligated to believe that Allah created all people equal. Right? Right or wrong? You can't believe that one tribe is inherently superior to another tribe. One skin color is inherently superior to another skin color. Right? I'm talking about people. I'm not talking about actions. Because people try to confuse. No, God created all people equal. He didn't create all actions equal. Right? Because the agendas out there try to get us to mix those two things, right? No matter what I do in life, never what my preferences and lifestyle are, I'm just equal to. No, sorry. God placed for us a code, right? Equality of people is mandatory to believe in, right? Racism, tribalism is a form of kufr. You get it? That's the idea. Is that clear, sister? We're good now? So iman, the opposite is kufr. So if you don't have mandatory iman, fulfilling the obligations, then you have a shade of kufr in you, right? That's the idea. Now let's get to the other one, the more dangerous one. Even though it's a slippery slope, right? You got to be careful. Major kufr are the types of things that cause you to fall out of Islam altogether. It means that you don't even have the minimum iman in you, the minimum faith in you. So what did we say was baseline faith? Come on, good review time. What did we say was minimum to be Muslim? Sidqan wa adla. Remember that? What is it? Islam is, except Islam is true, right? Everything in the Quran is true, right? So if someone were to say, famous Egyptian personality in the socialist era said, the Quran can tell us whatever it wants about Abraham and Ishmael, but those two personalities existing in history is not conclusively established by their mention in the Quran. Can you be a Muslim when you say stuff like that? Absolutely not. Sorry. It's either you believe this is from God or you just believe this is from humans. Could be right, could be wrong. Right? We said to accept that everything is true and to accept that all the rules are what? To accept that all the rules are what? Just and fair. Whether you understand the justice or not is not the point, right? If you are to reject any of the rules of Islam, right, you are saying they're not just, they're not fair, they're not wise. Accepting as true, accepting as just and fair. So, this major kufr thing, before I leave it, I'm going to give you a whole slide now on examples of major kufr, or forms, different forms of major kufr, because it's so dangerous, right? But if these things don't remove you altogether from Iman, the minor kufr, then why would the Sharia call it kufr? Why would the Quran call it kufr? Why would the Sunnah call it kufr? If it's not actually full-blown kufr, it's a lesser version. Why call it kufr? Why do you think, guys? Think of it. Yeah, to scare you away from it. We do this all the time, by the way. It's not like the Quran and Sunnah are like tricking us or they're vague. No, when I say, yo, that was murder, that was tough, but that one was murder. Do I actually mean that it is fatal? No, I'm just expressing stay away from that one. That professor is the worst. He's murdered. Don't go there. That's the idea. And so he's saying kufr, so stay away from it. Extremely dangerous. Almost will remove you from Islam. That's the first thing. The second thing is, remember how I said here, this is usually in beliefs. Usually it's a belief that will drop you below baseline, minimum faith, and will remove you from Islam. There's actually a few actions that can do it as well. That's what the word usually is there for. So the scholars disagree on one action in Islam. Heavily disagree. On one action in Islam, if you don't do it, which of these two does it belong to? Anyone know what it is? Salah. Salah, prayer. Most of the Sahaba understood from the Prophet ﷺ that whoever abandons prayer out of laziness, you're not praying your five on time, within the windows Allah allotted, right? The majority held that you fell into this. Some of the Sahaba held that you fell into that. You're still Muslim, but you're critical. You could fall out any minute. You could fall out as you're dying, and then you meet Allah not Muslim. Majority of the Sahaba, and the popularity of these views swings historically, that's a little bit irrelevant. But the idea is, who in their right mind would gamble like this, right? If a person is not praying their five, right, there is a chance that you meet Allah thinking you're Muslim, and it turns out you're not. That's enough of a reason to never fall into this. Is that clear, everybody? Because in one hadith, the Prophet ﷺ said, "Al-ahdu alladhi baynana wa baynahum as-salah, faman tarakaha faqad kafar." The difference between us and them is salah, us and them. And so whoever gives it up has committed kufr. Whoever neglects it has committed kufr. And among other hadith as well. And even the Quran uses the word iman, faith, and salah synonymously, interchangeably, because they're two sides of the same coin. Like, what faith do you really have, right? You're either just inside the line or just outside the line. But what faith do you really have when the most important thing to Allah, salah, is not important to you, right? That's the idea. So just keep those in mind. Now let us dig a little deeper into major kufr. You see that I added the word shirk there. What is shirk? Sisters, brothers, Only this morning. Yes. Shirk is to set as equals, to equate, to consider equal. Shirk and kufr are basically the same thing. Basically, they're the same thing. Just two ways to look at the same thing. All right? Because if we said Tawheed is to single Allah out, Shirk is to no longer single him out, right? To allow something to crowd what is exclusively Allah's rights. Put differently, it is to bury farmers, right? It is to bury Allah's unique right. So they're pretty much the same thing. Shirk, crowding Allah's right, and kufr, which is to deny Allah's right, his right to Tawheed. That's why. So the scholars say there's different types, just so we can look out for them. One type of shirk is the shirk of denial. One type of kufr or shirk, we're using them as synonyms from now on, okay, is the shirk of denial. So to deny any aspect of Islam that is clearly Islam, because some things are open to interpretation, but some things are not. The Quran is from Allah, no way around it. Muhammad is a prophet, no way around it, alayhi salatu wasalam. Alcohol is prohibited, no way around it. Being good to parents is mandatory, no way around it. Marriage is required between a man and a woman for it to be a halal relationship, no way around it, right? To deny any of these things, right, is a form of kufr. And this could happen for so many different reasons, right? It could happen out of ignorance, and a person might be excused, by the way. If they never heard the message and they try to find God, leave that alone. Leave that for the day of judgment. You don't need to worry about that. You trust God's justice. You leave that alone. But for us, I don't have to figure out, did he actually get convinced and then deny? No, you say you're Muslim, or you say, no, I'm not Muslim. I deny Islam, right? You either accept it or you don't, because you need to. You can say, I didn't open his heart to say he denied. Well, you don't have to open his heart. You don't have to open his heart. You have to, because I need to know, can I eat your meat? Is it zabiha or not? Are you allowed to marry my daughter or not? Do I bury you in a Muslim graveyard or not? Right? You have to have a functional definition. So one of the forms of kufr is the kufr of someone saying, I am not Muslim. I don't accept the faith parameters of Islam. That's all. Doesn't mean you have to be sort of aggressive towards them or impolite towards them or any of that stuff. But the idea is, if you don't accept any aspect of Islam due to ignorance or due to pride, you're not Muslim. You're not one of the faithful. You've committed major kufr. Is that clear, everybody? Pretty straightforward. Whether that person will be liable for their kufr, their major kufr on the day of judgment, leave that for the day of judgment. That's it. You don't have to get into it. You're a believer. You are certain in Allah Azza wa Jal being gracious and being just and being the best of judges, subhanahu wa ta'ala. That's all. But for this world, you're either a Muslim or you're not. There's no like third, right? There's faith and there's faithlessness. There's iman and there's kufr. There's no third category. Okay. So now, because I'm preempting all the question of like, what if they never heard the message? What if they never received the message? That talks about the liability for their kufr. But in terms of how do we understand it, it's kufr. Do you believe in Muhammad? No. Okay, believing in Muhammad is one of the requirements of faith. So therefore, according to our definition, you don't qualify for faith. That's it. And he's going to say, yeah, I agree with you. I'm not one of the faithful in your religion. That's all. It's like definitions have to be there. Is this clear? Like, I'm not insulting vegetables when I say fruits have seeds. I'm sorry, you don't make the cut. Have you ever seen a vegetable insulted by this? That's all. We just have to have language with which we understand one another. I'm not saying kufr and iman are like fruits and vegetables. I mean, kufr is not just a decision. It's a bad decision. But he may not be liable for his bad decision because he didn't get a clear message. If he didn't get a clear message, he won't be punished. That's what the Quran says. وَمَا كُنَّا مُعَذِّبِينَ حَتَّى نَبْعَثَ رَسُولًا. We don't punish until we first send a messenger. Okay, the other one. Doubt. You believe in Islam and you profess to accept it. You don't deny it, but you doubt that it's true. You internalize doubt. When is that major kufr? Let me skip this one because we have a whole section on doubt coming up, inshallah. All right? Let me skip this one. Number 3 is disrespect. Like, you can say, I believe in Islam and all of Islam's teachings are awesome, and you pray your 5 and you pay your zakah and you make hajj just because you feel like it's, a good thing to do. but you don't respect Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. You don't respect his book. You don't respect his messenger. You know, we have a very unfortunate prevalence of like mock culture in our day and age, right? Where people make a mockery of God. And we have to be careful because this can trickle into the Muslim unintentionally, right? Where you make jokes about what you can never joke about. So if you were to mock any of the facts, that's already denial, right? But it's a mockery. Or to deny, or to mock any of the teachings. You know, Al-Ma'arri. Al-Ma'arri is like a famous guy in Islamic history who was very deviant. And he caused like a really big controversy, and the scholars basically like got all up in arms to shout him down before like his poisons affect people's brains. So he basically said in poetry, but I don't memorize the couplets now. He says, how come in Islam? He says, isn't that weird? He said literally, I'm a believer, but isn't it kind of weird? He means, isn't it kind of stupid? That's what he means, right? The mockery is going to be clear. That in Islam, you get your hand cut off for a quarter of a dinar. Let's just say $20 for simplicity. And if you accidentally cut off someone's hand, you got to pay him $2,000. What's he saying here? Why is the thief's hand disposable for $20, whereas the compensation for like an accident at work, $2,000 for losing a hand? Those are rules in Islam, by the way. He's making fun of them. What's he trying to say here? Sisters, what's he trying to say? It's contradictory, right? So the famous Maliki scholar, he said to him, لما كانت أمينة كانت ثمينة فلما خانت هانت. That when the hand was trustworthy, this is an innocent hand. That this person who lost his hand, it's an innocent hand. He's not a thief, right? So it was worth more. And this guy had a treacherous hand, so it lost its value. Right or wrong? So he's mocking like such contradictions, man. One hand, lost hand for stealing $20, and you know this guy has to pay him back $2,000. It's just, this is called mockery, right? You can't be a Muslim with this. Is this clear? By the way, it is perfect wisdom why that's the case. Because in order for you to stop people from stealing, you want to make it extremely risky for them to steal, right? So you lower the threshold. And if you want people to not be negligent in their factories and stuff, and at work, you want to make the liability for hurting someone really high. So this is not about the hand. This is about protecting people's property, right? Minimizing theft. You made it very likely, right? And this is about protecting people's hands. And therefore, you made it very unlikely that a person would endanger another person and be reckless. I hope the example was clear. I'm sorry if it was long-winded. Or, you know, some people just, a'udhu billah, they outright insult God, right? They just insult God. I remember one physician said to me, that he heard a cosmetic surgeon in the hospital say, after fixing someone's face, I forgot what it was, cleft lip or a car accident or whatever it is. No, it was a congenital issue. He was born with it. And then the plastic surgeon basically restored the normative appearance of that person's face. And he said, I heard this cosmetic surgeon say, we fixed his mistake. Who's his? We fixed his mistake. That person wasn't Muslim. But if he were a Muslim, he would have just left Islam by saying that. Because you can't be excused by ignorance. Like, I didn't hear about Islam. That's imaginable. But you don't need to be educated on the fact that God needs to be respected, right? And there are so many ayat about this. I remember once I went to an interfaith gathering. It's big, like Thanksgiving thing about like different perspectives on gratitude. And I was trying to share something about Islam. And I'm sitting back there. And that's why I'm mentioning so much of this, because it's so prevalent. It's disgusting how people have no regard for God, no regard for his prophets. And so they were all backstage getting ready, and they all knew each other. I'm the newbie. And whatever the debate was, they were having like a very lighthearted debate about something, a restaurant or something else, or how to do this. And the Christian woman said to the rabbi in front of me, it was like 40 pastors there and like religious leaders. She said to him, come on, man, don't be hard-headed. You know, we all heard that the reason why Moses got lost in the wilderness is because he was too stubborn to ask for directions, just like any other man. So I heard that, I was like, yo, the rabbi is about to like snap at her. Like, how dare she say that? I was offended, of course, when Musa alayhi salam wasn't the rabbi, but I was waiting for it to hit the fan. Like, I thought he would think, like me, that it's extremely offensive. And then he responded and said what? He said, no, he said, ha, 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 ha. I heard it was because he was talking to a tree. A'udhu billah, you know, the story of Musa alayhi salam when Allah spoke to him from by the tree. As soon as I heard this, like, and everyone just starts cracking up, unconsciously, wallahi, I just found myself, I just started backpedaling to the corner of the backstage, we're behind stage, to the backstage, because I remembered Allah Azza wa Jal said, وَقَدْ نَزَّلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الْكِتَابِ. Allah has revealed to you in the scriptures. And إِذَا سَمِعْتُمْ آيَاتِ اللَّهِ يُكْفَرُ بِهَا. That when you hear the signs of God being mocked, disbelieved in, وَيُسْتَهْزَأُ بِهَا, and being mocked, فَلَا تَقْعُدُوا مَعَهُمْ. Don't sit with them. إِنَّكُمْ إِذًا مِثْلُهُمْ. You are in that case just like them. So it's not even about mocking God. It is about you being complicit in the mockery of God and his angels and his books and his messengers and the concept of a last day and destiny and otherwise, right? And this happens across cultures. All right? So disrespect is a huge way for people to fall beneath baseline faith. Oh man, I went 7 minutes over. I'll talk about this next one after the break. I want to try to be honest. It's 11:07. We'll resume at 11:15. Continuing this discussion on the major types of kufr. Any questions before we go? That can't wait? Good. Jazakallah khair. Barakallahu feekum. You have 8 minutes.